with David's teaching schedule, couldn't be here tonight.
All right. The second item on the evening's agenda is the approval of the minutes. We're getting some feedback here. Was there a motion?
Second. Dan moved, I think.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. New business. Item 3A. Chowan Park Playground Equipment.
I'd be happy to start this one off if you'd like.
Yeah, please do so. Thank you.
We've used a little different process, a little different approach to the design and selection of playground equipment. Our Assistant Director, Ed McCold, has done a great job working with this program for several years now. And the process, which has worked successfully in the past, involves community input in the way Ed, as I mentioned in my staff report, has been doing it. He goes out and solicits for volunteers to serve on a small committee and asks them to share those views with neighbors, and they come back to the table until they find a design they think that really reflects the needs and desires and expectations of the neighborhood. This time around, we thought we'd make it a little more extensive. I asked Ed to go ahead and form his committee, which he did. He found some wonderful volunteers. And after they came up with a plan they thought that might work, and we did a mail-in to 333 households, which were those within 1,000 feet of the park, and invited them to an open house. And since the open house, I know that Ed had continued to visit with people who were actively involved in the process and showed a strong interest from the neighborhood, and went through a couple other revision plans until they think they found one that is equally satisfied their needs and desires. The plan actually shrunk in size from its original look. And from a staff perspective, we feel it's really our duty to ensure that the final design is obviously within budget, that the equipment is safe, that it ends up being a very good value for the community, that it meets ADA requirements required by law, and that it's properly sized for its surroundings in the park, that makes sure it's not oversized and overpowers the character of the park. The rest of it, as far as colors and amenities and selection of equipment, the style and type, I mean, they're almost endless. And in our view as staff, that really, we'd really like the neighbors to weigh in on that, and which is what they have done. So be sure that we meet their desires and expectations and their needs. The other step that we've changed this year is to bring it to the park board for your kind of final approval, and that provides a venue for those, in case there's any opposition to it, another level, if you will, to be heard before this then goes on to the city council for their approval. That's a process we followed. My only regret that I wish I would have thought of earlier is to ask a park board member to have served on that committee, and I think that's something I might recommend for the next go round. But other than that, it seems like it works pretty well, and as you can see from some of the input that you've received in your packet, it's tough to please everybody. So I know that there are some neighbors here and our vendor from Game Time, if we have any questions of our vendor. But with that, I think I would ask Ed to fill in any blanks or holes I might have left in describing the process and where we're at today.
Thanks, John. I guess the first thing I'd like to do is mention Jennifer Cornier, who's in the crowd. She was one of the neighborhood committee members. Matt Doobie, who was the other person, is out of town on business. The other person I'd like to cite in the audience today who was very helpful, Angela Gatke. Angela was at the open house and has young children, and presented to the neighborhood committee and myself that we may be missing some toddler elements. For the next, I would say, week, Angela, the Game Time representatives that are here, Matt and Jenny and myself made a series of revisions, and the plan that you have today is one that, it's my understanding, everybody endorses and is wholeheartedly embracing. With that, I guess I would entertain any questions a park board would have. If there's anything specific to components, I may ask one of our sales representatives to assist me.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've also passed out tonight some additional copies that give you another view, kind of a 3D view, some colored copies of the equipment itself and kind of a view of what it might look like, how it fits into the character of the park. You can see how it abuts the full-size basketball court. Now, it shows a soccer goal there, which really is not there.
Yeah, the committee does want, in addition to what you see in terms of playground equipment, 3 trees, 5 benches, 2 trash receptacles, and a pair of soccer goals. The soccer goals that you see in the drawing are not the size that would be purchased for the park. There would be probably 4 by 9, 6 by 12 at the largest. That has been factored in and will, be within our a budgeted amount.
I'd like to offer one other comment. I think from what I've learned, I've heard from Ed through your committee meetings, the conscious selection of the pieces wasn't simply done on what looks to be the most fun. And I think one of the things they try to accomplish is not only serving all the age groups that are appropriate for playground equipment, but also keeping in mind the obesity issue that we're facing, to make play equipment a little more exciting, more challenging, and more physically rewarding for kids, to hopefully attract them to use their more motor skills and hopefully go after the obesity issue a little stronger. I think that's a fair statement.
That is a correct statement. Actually, what I'm seeing with all the playground manufacturers today is kind of a shift in how that playground equipment looks and operates today. Call it the new generation, and a lot of it is to fight the obesity, and some of it also addresses different motor needs of the children in childhood development.
So I have a process question. Is this the right time to? So after the open house and after you've talked with these people, did the rest of the neighborhood get a chance to see what I'm looking at here?
No, they did not. Again, at the open house, we had large drawings of our proposed plan. I think at the open house we had roughly 12 adults and 5 children. The open house was from roughly 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. and we had good dialogue, and we started the process of making a couple revisions, just cutting and pasting a couple pieces. I would like to state that Angela really stepped forth from the community that felt there was maybe a deficiency or missing a piece for the toddler, and took charge. And I think Angela, like Matt and Jenny, early in the process, branched out to other neighbors that had toddler-aged children. So I think it's a good representation. What you have here today is a good representation of the neighborhood at large, really embracing it. One other comment I'll make is I've had a number of great neighborhood committees in the past. This one had a lot of talent. Angela and Jennifer are both in the education field, and Matt an architect. So we had childhood development well represented, and we had, from the architectural standpoint, a lot of expertise at the table.
Ed and John, I really do like the change in process that includes an open house. I think it broadens the basis of community consensus. But How is the open house communicated to the community? How do they find out about it?
I believe there's a letter in your packet. We sent a letter to roughly 300,
Oh, okay.
35 homes
In the mailing.
within 1,000 feet.
And is it clear about when the time for public comment tolls, when it's over, so that people feel as though if they don't get their comment in by a certain time, that it will not be considered because it's too tardy?
I did receive some phone calls. I received some emails. Everything was positive. And then we had good dialogue, I felt, the night of the open house.
Okay. Well, I like the change.
Yeah, as stated in the letter, that after reviewing and discussing the plan on February 16th, if the neighborhood agrees with the neighborhood committee, the proposed plan would be placed on the March 8th Park Board agenda for their approval. And if it receives Park Board approval, we'll advertise and bid it after that. So it was made aware that that's the process we were going to follow, and there would be no follow-up open house to get kind of their blessing that this is the results of those who chose to be actively involved.
Since you've solicited, I guess, our comments about this new process, I'd like to chime in and support this process and all processes that would tend to involve a wider swath of the community that the park might impact on. And you've done that in this case. And the only caution I would urge is, and it seems to have been done again from the paper trail that I can see, is that you assure some way to bring the process to a conclusion. I guess that happens here at the Park Board, but to assure some way that the public feels they have had the chance to make their comments, and that even if there are still some diverse views about the use of the parkland, that still people can come together as a part of the overall community in terms of what's been decided to that point. So to repeat, I do support a more participative process with the neighborhoods, and as long as you can bring it to a nice conclusion like this, where it comes before us as a largely supported endeavor, then I like that a lot.
Ed, may I ask, do you have a sense, as I believe that neighborhood has always been a place where young families have lived and want to live? So I noticed the park was designed for typically kindergarten or younger through maybe high school. Was there any activity by senior citizens in the neighborhood where they'd like something in the park for them to use? And then the final question, what's the typical life expectancy of a park? Like, will it last 20 years with little or no maintenance or replacement? Thank you.
If I start with what you last asked, the playground equipment today was put in 1991. I know the question was also asked at our open house, and this should easily last 20 years. And depending on the economy, we'll see what our replacement schedule becomes. As far as the diversity of the neighborhood, I know that some of the folks I spoke to once my letter went out were that senior population. What was really comforting to me was when they found out who was involved in the neighborhood committee. They were really at ease to the point where, oh boy, just stamp that, love what they've done in the past. The park is a small park. We've got this playground site. There's a hard surface court there, which it sounds like young kids like to ride their bikes, roller skates, and older kids to adults probably would play basketball. Other park amenities at this time, it's a backstop, which I believe is going to be removed. That isn't really used anymore. More trees and benches added, which maybe will be enhancements for an older population to come and enjoy, sit and watch.
If there's soccer goals put in, will this become a scheduled field or no?
It would not become a scheduled field.
It's been asked before, people have questioned me, is there a plan for the rest of the parks, you know, beyond the current CIP as far as the playground equipment that we have? I mean, is there some schedule of playground equipment that may have been in the system for 10 years or 15 years? In your mind, what should be replaced sooner rather than later beyond, say, something like Countryside that's on the CIP?
Yeah, Countryside's the next one on our schedule. I'm trying to think after Countryside.
There is an ongoing plan that's in the book, and we used to show it as a 15 and a 20-year replacement schedule. And we put them both because some, in fact, do only survive about 15 years. Back in the older days when they used a lot of wood structures, and they start to splinter and wear and became unsafe. But with all the newer equipment, things seem to last about 20 years, and even if they were still sturdy and still usable, I think the neighborhood likes a new look at that point. So we're pretty much on a 20-year replacement schedule and purchasing more sustainable things and stay away from a lot of the woods in the playground design. But there is a schedule.
I also like the addition of the trees in there. I think that will be neat for the next generation too. So.
You need a motion to accept?
Do you want to hear from anybody speak, or that's up to you?
Would anybody in the public like to have an opportunity to come up and talk about the park?
Can I just make a comment?
Sure, come on up.
Name and address.
Yep. Name and address, please.
Yep, my name is Angela Gadke, 5825 Drew Avenue, and I attended the open house, and I just wanted to commend the process and commend Ed for his work. And at the open house, I was pretty vocal in trying to give more activities and equipment for younger children. And Ed was very open to suggestions, and I felt that the process was fantastic. I can't really speak to a way to change it. And I think we came to kind of a consensus of a plan that really well represents the families, the young families in our neighborhood, as well as the families of children that are a little bit older. So I just wanted to kind of give Ed a little bit of credit for all the work he did with this, and also just being able to listen to, you know, me, I guess I should say, voicing my opinions and concerns with the first plan of the park. But now I think it looks fabulous. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed, two follow-on questions. One is, what is the actual warranty of the equipment itself? What if there's issues or problems, how long does that last?
I'm going to have John Elder from Game Time step up and maybe answer that one.
Good evening. John Elder, Minnesota, Wisconsin Playground. The warranty on the product is 100 years on locks and uprights. It's 15 years on rotationally molded plastics and 1 year on the moving parts.
Did you ever get any objections to that 1 year on moving parts?
No, because honestly, if something's going to happen, it's going to happen within the first year. We warranty very few issues. With the way things are made at this time, through the play labs and through testing, anything that's prone to break is not even ever really put into service out into the field.
Okay. Thanks. And then the follow-on, Ed, is the surface is chips? Is it wood chips?
Wood fiber, which is it a 10-foot or 12-foot fall height?
It's a 12-foot fall height. And if I may, the difference between an engineered wood fiber and a wood chip is if you're getting a wood chip, you're at the mercy of whatever the person operating the chipper decides to throw in that day, whether it's leaves, it's branches, it's bark, and limbs, whatever. An engineered wood fiber is a shredded core of a hardwood tree. And the benefit to that is it knits together to make more of a static surface, which will then meet ADA and provide the impact attenuation for the higher falls. It also allows you to get a wheelchair or a walker across, for whether it be, somebody who has ADA challenges, or you have somebody who's elderly, maybe an older person who's out with a grandchild.
And how do we replace that as it, you eventually, I feel you lose some, so how does that
You
work?
do. There will be a top off every 5 to 7 years, and that's just a couple of inches topped off.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Actually, I've got one other question that you just brought up something that made me think. Is there anything in this facility that is directed towards children with, developmental disabilities or special needs, any swings, things like that we have at other parks?
Yes, please.
You can put that on the document table if you'd like.
A lot of the web-based activities, the rope-based activities, are quite often used for kids that do have some of the ADA challenges as well as some of the cognitive disorders. There's also ground-level events for children who have mobile disabilities, such as steering wheels and the like. The tire swing is something that is strongly pursued for ADA purposes, as it's quite often used for children with mobility issues because of the larger area that you're able to place the child onto. For swings, we did 2 belt swings and 2 enclosed tot seats. The purpose behind that was because of the larger number of smaller children in that area. And the enclosed tot seat is by far the most safe available. The toddler rocker as well as the seesaw are also ADA compliant as ground level events and are used for that. These are some of the things that are of the new age playgrounds where it's using different muscles, different motor skills, and that's especially helpful for kids with whether it's the autism or the spectrum disorders or any of the physical disabilities.
How about for children with disabilities that might like to swing but can't stay in a loop belt or won't fit into the
Enclosed tot seat?
yeah.
At this point, there's nothing there, but it is equipped, or we are able to put into this current structure a adaptive seat.
Yeah, I know we have them in other parks, right?
Actually, we had one with the original drawing that went to the open house, and I know one of the parents that had a toddler was concerned about the weight of that bucket, and if a toddler wasn't paying attention, it was almost like not a weapon, but something that could really, hurt a small child. So after our open house, we went to 2 belt and 2 bucket.
In addition, I'm sorry, if I may add, there's a nature discovery table underneath one of the decks where kids are actually able to position themselves, and it's a very tactile sensation. And anytime I'm putting together a playground like this, I like to have something that's tactile because it is especially attractive and calming for children with any of the sensory disorders.
I might just be a little bit sensitive about that as a parent with a child with special needs. So speaking from my perspective, that's one of the things we really like about Roslyn Park, is that our daughter, who's 9 years old, can swing on that, and she wouldn't play with really a lot that's here, but other kids would.
Right.
So speaking on behalf of parents that do have special needs, I think it's something that needs to be considered, and if anybody has talked to anybody in that neighborhood that might be a user of that park, I think their thoughts should be taken into consideration if they haven't been brought to the table. And I know people have been made aware of it, but that's just kind of a group of people that I try to think about.
Absolutely, and I totally respect that. That's one of the things that you'll notice with our plan, which you'll find on some of the paperwork, is what the ADA requirements are versus what what we are proposing, and every single number will, at a minimum, usually exceed that. I was a police officer in a school for disabled children and adults, and so when I'm putting together a playground, I do try to keep those sort of things in mind, especially the sensory and the tactile things as well.
With this equipment for the swings, if you wanted to add one of those 2 years down the road, could you put that on that swing set?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can easily swap out one of the belt buckets for the ADA. Again, that's what we had originally proposed, and my experience, disability or not, that's typically the most popular swing.
Yeah, it gets a lot of use at Roslyn.
Gets a ton of use. So, yeah, Matt, Jenny, Angela, all of us were on the same page with that. It was a different resident that made the comment about, just concerned about his or her toddler in the event that they weren't paying attention and that, heavier seat, collided with them. So that's why it was taken out, but it could easily be put back in.
Absolutely.
So then your company provides both the equipment and the installation, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we're going to be in budget? Okay.
Yes, sir. And one of the things that will be bid out will be the actual installation of the equipment. We will be bidding on the installation, but the way that the equipment is priced, sir, you will see that it will be within budget.
Okay. Thanks.
You bet.
Does anybody else have any comments, questions, thoughts? Okay, if there are none, I guess I'd like to make a motion to propose the proposal as outlined, but I guess I'd like to throw out there the caveat of having one of the swings for consideration being one for developmentally disabled individuals, like we do in some other parks.
I'll second the motion.
Discussion? All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
I'd like to thank all the volunteers
Thank you very
that
much.
participated in that. And thank you for coming.
Exactly.
When's that going to be?
Yeah.
Item 3B on the evening's agenda was discussion of on-camera meetings versus off-camera meetings for a couple of reasons, I think. We've had the opportunity to have a couple of off-session meetings that I've gotten some feedback from that people feel as though it's maybe you're an environment that's more conducive to dialogue, that we're all sitting around a table looking at one another versus kind of staring back and forth, sometimes at an audience where there's nobody there and some cameras in front of us, and maybe it could be a little bit more productive. Maybe we could have more meetings in the case of certain topics that we want to consider, and at the same time not require as much time expense. So I guess the topic is something we just should throw out there and see what people's thoughts are. Bill, can we start at your end and maybe work our way down the line and see what you think?
Sure. Well, there are at least two broad areas, I think, in my mind where off-camera sessions would facilitate our coming to eventual agreement about issues which may be more nettlesome issues, such as a few of which we faced in the past year, where we go through a long phase of data collection and for each and every member of the park board, and oftentimes I think when we sit in an on-camera session, there are different levels of understanding as to what the issue is. The briefing has tended to be in writing. We may then get a briefing right then from staff and be expected to act on something in a fairly short order manner. So I think one of the benefits of work sessions, which may be off camera, is that we can absorb research that may have been done by one or more members and staff. We can ask questions about the research. We can ask for follow-up research, and we can get ourselves to a level where we feel comfortable, that we understand what's going on and what we're being asked to decide upon. Now, we may still have questions, additional questions on camera, but I'd rather see more on-camera time be used by the individual members to state what they think about their understanding of the issue and what they think about actions to be taken, or what the actions to be taken around that issue should mean. And so that rather than asking factual questions and continuing to collect data on camera, I'd rather have us express our opinions about why it is we think we should do something or not do something. And rather than have formal meetings once a month drag on for hours sometimes where we're going through data collection, I think we could put that into a work session. Also during that work session, I think, as you just mentioned, rather than sitting in a long line and sort of looking out into space, we can sit in more of a collegial environment and spend some time not only collecting data but exchanging opinions or asking each other why we feel the way we do. And I think that environment would be more conducive to that. Not to say that we wouldn't do that in an on-camera session, but I think that would allow us then, to form points of view around certain issues and to express those points of view with some degree of confidence that may or may not agree with other members of the board, but it doesn't take anybody by surprise per se, and we are encouraged much more to do that. So I think those are two reasons why I can see the benefit of having what I would call some work sessions. It would also perhaps allow us to divide up tasks and to do or to lead investigations, and then to bring the other members of the board up to speed on what those investigations have found about upcoming issues. So maybe that'll get us started.
Thanks, Bill. Ellen, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, and I was, I'm wondering, are you asking us to comment on
Yeah,
this?
I'm not trying to do a straw poll here.
Okay, yeah, no, I know you're not.
Any...
Scott and Neil wrote and asked, and I was thinking in terms of those questions, in terms of, he said, do you believe that filming your commission meeting and subsequently broadcasting the film meeting on cable television would change the manner in which commissioners behave or participate? And I don't, I mean, I actually get a little self-conscious on film, so I realize how it can affect a free flow of opinions and attitudes. But in general, I don't think it, when it comes right down to it, I don't think it has a totally negative effect. I think that we don't really, I would come in terms of when I need to or want to look into what's been going on in the city, I look through the minutes, and instead of watching what's been on video, and I think that as long as there's good minutes, we don't need to be filmed. I also think that in this day and age, we have to watch every penny, and the fact that there are people that we're paying to film these. I'm very hesitant about spending taxpayer money because I think the cost versus the benefit might be minimal. You know, that piece is something that I would be interested in having a discussion on, whether or not the community might feel that this is such a service that we want to spend our tax money on filming. But one of the questions that Scott had asked us was, in what areas do you think it would be very important to have to be filmed? And I think that any kind of public comment period, it would be important to have those be filmed. So those are my basic thoughts on that.
I do agree with everything that Bill and Ellen just said, but I'm wondering if we do take some of our meetings and convert them into work sessions that are not televised, is there any requisite number of public meetings that the park board must have to satisfy an ordinance requirement, or? No? Okay, well, that's one of my concerns.
If I can answer that. Right now, the ordinance says you meet the second Tuesday of every month unless the park board chooses not to. So you can choose to have fewer meetings if you vote to not have those meetings, or if the chairman and staff decide it's not necessary. And the only thing I would give a correction on, you can still have a meeting, not necessarily a work session, that's not on camera. I think we shouldn't confuse work session versus meetings off camera. Work sessions, like I mentioned in my staff report, are really more singular agenda topic items. That is one issue, you're going to work at it, and that's it. Meetings are when you actually intend to take action. You'll still be able to take public comment, though it won't be on camera. Could be very well be in the community room. You might run the meetings at the senior center. So there's a difference between an off-session meeting and a work session.
Okay. And the other question I have, John, is after the meetings are televised, at the staff level, after people see the meeting on TV, do they call in? I mean, is this, are we finding that we get a public input as a result of the meetings being televised?
Well, to my surprise, there are quite a few people that do watch it.
There are.
Well, I can't substantiate that and tell you how many. Just my own experience, yeah, I do get people, I watched a meeting the other night. Why? But, no, they do.
So that's what I'm, I really would, I wouldn't want to take, that's why I'm asking the question about the requisite number of meetings where votes are taken. If people are really responding to a meeting they see on TV, I think if we are taking a vote, it should be televised. If we're not taking a vote and it's truly a work session, and we could cut back on the number of meetings that are televised. Do you understand what I'm saying? I think that's my opinion. All right, did I make myself clear, or?
No, I think
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
I think what you're saying is how much value and demand is there to the greater community who want to watch the action of the park board.
And see a vote taken, right.
And see votes taken. The reality is they can always access the minutes to the meeting. And I suppose the question for you as a park board is how important is that so they can watch it at home on TV versus reading the minutes, but the action takes place here, whether it's on camera or not. And if they want to be actively involved in their government, they need to be here. I think that's something you should consider as you're thinking through camera versus no camera. Okay. How often do you camera? Maybe you only want to have certain types of issues that you want to require on-camera meetings, as does the city of Minnetonka. I mean, there's no two the same. And some never have cameras. Some have them all the time like us, and some have some.
I definitely would like to echo all the statements previously made, but I do feel that it does affect the manner that I conduct myself, and I don't think it's conscious. I think it's just subconscious when you're on TV and when you're up high like this. I do think that the manner, again, that I'm conducting myself is different. I do think that whether it's a off-camera meeting or a work session, a a scenario where you're in more of a round table and you can discuss, and maybe park board members need to take on a little bit more burden, as Bill was alluding to, doing a little bit more research or a little bit more understanding of the issues that are presented before us, so that we don't get here and obviously something like a playground isn't going to be there's not going to be a lot of distress over it, and it's a relatively simple approval, but to have some sort of dialogue, some sort of back and forth be among members and among staff that's in a less formal environment can really ramp up, so that, yes, you know what, we have done our work, and here are the off-camera meeting minutes that we had back in January, and now we've kind of collected data, and now we're on camera in March here, and this is what we proposed, and like Bill said, then the facts are all out of it, and kind of everyone understands their opinion, and I think that maybe would help us as a board to one, be more informed, and two, be able to discuss different factors with our neighbors and with people that we know in the community.
I think just as a product of ordinary city business that we're going to end up having meetings fairly regularly anyhow, just because like tonight you need to come here for Chalmers Park. But as I look back and forth, like last July when we had our work session talking about donations, and I thought there was a really good discourse of ideas, Todd throwing out the idea of having a contract, and I thought it was very productive, and people were really just kind of chiming in whenever they wanted to and didn't have to worry about if they're interrupting and touching their microphone. I thought it was a good work session, and I thought we could have had more of those. And if it ever evolved into something that somebody wanted to make a formal motion, it would be something that we'd bring then to a park board meeting. I just thought it was a good way to, as has been mentioned here before, taking some of these topics that we maybe want to dig into and breaking them up, not necessarily into full-blown park board meeting work sessions, but maybe into smaller little subgroups of people that might be interested in item A and some people that might be interested in item B, and try to tackle more at the same time, and then coming back and reporting back to the group like Ellen did with the CAT team for the Public Works building. So I like the idea.
I think the two issues that come to mind are transparency and accessibility. And Edina has done a good job televising our meetings, putting it online and also on cable TV. And I do get emails, I watched your meeting online or on TV. And so there are viewers out there that are following our meetings. And to take that away from viewers in the age of Twitter, social media, would really be a step backwards for Edina. We're a forward-thinking community, and so I just couldn't do that to our community members. And also, it's accessibility. So think about, yes, they can always come to our meetings, but what if they have obligations? What if they cannot, drive here? There are many different reasons, but think about that as you consider this. As far as work sessions, if we're not taking action, I think we have a lot of issues that we need to work on. There's a lot of interest on the park board, a lot of questions, and I would love to have more work sessions where we're not taking action and divulge into these issues, and have that dialogue, not sit, like this and just have a dialogue back and forth and kind of go at it. I think that is very productive. But as far as the action, that needs to be televised and upfront with the community.
I think we've touched on a lot of different sides of this. Just a little perspective from the school board, my involvement there. About 3 years ago, we went to roughly every other meeting is a workshop versus a formal meeting. And I think that structure has worked out real nice for us. As Bill stated earlier, the sort of that digestion of information, that gathering of information, but then also encapsulating that information so it can become emotion that shows up in a meeting. And I think that's what we're sort of touching on. I think that's what we're missing sometimes. We have ideas we want to pursue, or we have thoughts of things that like we are interested in, but unless staff comes to us with a proposal to do X, we don't have a way of sort of talking about that, articulating that in a general sense. And I think that's what workshops are for. And I agree with Kia, at school board, at a workshop, we rarely pass items there. Occasionally when something's time sensitive or has a deadline, we'll approve something there, but then it comes back to the regular meeting and is approved as part of the minutes there. So the only point mentioned here, talking about a workshop has to be a one-topic type of workshop. I would disagree with that. I think you can come into a workshop and say, okay, we're going to spend 20 minutes on item A, 20 minutes on item B, and 20 minutes on item C. And so it doesn't just have to be a single focus. And, you know, we may want to think about some kind of regular schedule to start with to get into the process. You know, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's every other. I'm not sure how often we really need to pass things, but I would highly encourage that if we're going to pass a motion, it's in front of the cameras at a televised meeting. So, thank you.
Thank you. I agree very much with Randy. I noticed the third question that City Manager Scott Neal asked was, do you believe that filming and rebroadcasting your commission meetings is an important tool in communicating your commission's activities and discussions with the public? And I do. I've only had 2 people say I saw you on television, one of whom said you need a haircut. But I remember almost 4 years ago when Joe and Rob and I interviewed with the City Council for the 3 spots, I think there were 16 people who were willing to serve. It's a lot of people. And there's real interest. I think television has become the equivalent of a New England town hall meeting, but you don't have to go to the City Hall. You can have a cup of coffee on a Saturday morning and see what's going on in your city. So I don't see anything wrong with it. I do like the idea if there's no action items, we could get longer briefings from the staff and a longer question period of understanding what the issues are. Thanks.
And in general, I definitely agree what has been said so far. It seems that we kind of do have some basic questions that we do kind of feign away from on camera. I know that for a couple of work session, actually the previous work session where one of the focuses was the golf course, there was definitely more questions that were brought up, and I felt a little more confident coming in, knowing a little more about the golf course, knowing about a little more of the concerns, things like that. Versus here, sometimes, I know definitely myself, I tend to shy away sometimes some of the basic questions that I might need to be answered, but other people might find it kind of irrelevant. So it's kind of a nice spot to get things out of the way, but also on camera, we should probably definitely focus more on like very important kind of questions that we can't really answer ourselves, but definitely need help from the community or even experts. I believe that even so far to this meeting, we've done a great job with that, especially with the Challen Park design. I thought that coming in, the design looked great. I didn't really have all too many questions, but the questions that were brought up were definitely of specific concerns, especially to the community. So I thought that was very important for on camera. So really, work sessions help for less support questions or ones that are a little more basic. And the more important questions, the more kind of in-depth questions should be definitely brought up on camera.
Thank you, Felix. Good thoughts. All right, I thought that was helpful. Appreciate everybody sharing their
Could
opinions.
I interrupt with one more comment?
Absolutely.
Having listened to everything, which impresses me, I mean, there's a little bit of a different point of view being expressed by each person. From the standpoint of Kia's accessibility and transparency, and some of the things that Randy was saying, and Dan down on the other end also, I think that we spend a lot of time asking questions of staff, looking at staff, and having a communication back and forth between the member and staff. If we had some work sessions, I think we would become more comfortable looking at each other, asking questions of each other, and being willing to express some degree of disagreement when it was appropriate. And that's not a matter of saying that the disagreement is wrong. It's saying it's a matter we feel comfortable with one another to do it. And that comfort would then help us to arrive at, I think, better decisions as a park board. So I don't know, some of you may see each other every day in a work environment or in a city environment. I tend not to. I see you once a month at these meetings. And I hear some very interesting and some very good things from each and every one of us at these meetings. And I would like to be able to exchange our views and sort of get into some of these issues in a little more comfortable, direct, perhaps even intimate way. Now, the public on camera would benefit from this because I think it's much more likely at that point that we would then exchange views on camera and be much more forthcoming about what we were thinking and about how, what point of view we were taking, what perspective we were taking on a particular issue as we tried to arrive at the correct decision for the community. So I just wanted to add that as a footnote. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. I thought that was really helpful. Thank you very much. There's no action required, so the next item of business is item 3C, just kind of a recap of our work session. For those that were there were a few items that we discussed. One was the Veterans Memorial, future maintenance expense, facility user fees, the future of some of our parks, specifically Edinburgh and Centennial Lakes, and naming of parks and facilities and policies, certain things that we've kind of touched on a little bit. Certainly with Veterans Memorial, that's something that's active and ongoing. So just thought it would be helpful to bring those back to the table and talk about them again, and maybe look forward here through the next few months on our calendar and see how we maybe wanted to tackle these items. Some of them are already ongoing with the Veterans Memorial, but one thing that came up was maintenance and the so I guess if we had to start with item C1, the Veterans Memorial, what I recall hearing was the discussion of having one, proposal versus 3-4 proposals, and for those that were there, I thought it would be helpful to see more than one so that we could ask specifically, what would the future maintenance cost, because that seemed to be a concern for some people. What would the city's, burden be for maintaining that park? So I guess without knowing where they're at in their process of seeking architectural designs, what's the thought with that?
The discussion of future maintenance expenses will kind of form its own calendar based on the design process. And when we're going to bring forward a design to the park board, that we won't know what it'll cost to maintain it until we have a design that's approved. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of set its own calendar. That's something we can certainly put on next month's agenda, but I won't have the information to tell you what it's going to cost to maintain it until I know what it's going to be. And I think at that point, the dialogue that'll take place is who then should cover the cost for that. And I heard some comments at the joint work session. We also need to come forward, what is the value of the land where this is going to be placed on? That should be brought forward and expressed to the public. Cost of the restrooms, because we've added that feature to the park. Should that be the burden of the Veterans Memorial, even though it's currently serving the park as a whole? We need to have a little bit of that discussion. But I really can't come forward with what the expenses are until the design is in place.
Did they say something about having an open house? Was there a discussion of that, or would that be maybe something to be more appropriate when we had several designs for people to weigh in on and ask questions and kind of let it formulate that way?
Yeah, the city council made it real clear they would like an open house that we will host, and they also will have a public hearing at the council level. Now, that will be part of the process. Now, I suppose the question for the park board, do you also want to have a public hearing or an input from the community beyond an open house? I'm envisioning once we have a design to show the community, bring in the community, answer their questions. And if you feel after that that there's a need to put it on the park board agenda, we certainly can and make the decision at that point. It's a process decision. But I think that's what I heard from the city council, that they definitely want an open house and they definitely want to have a public hearing at the council. Specifically, you want to be sure that they're aware of what the maintenance expenses and what the burden on the taxpayer is going to be. And we'll have that ironed out when we get a design in place.
Have they solicited design companies, architectural firms to submit proposals yet, or no?
The city council approved the contract with SEH Architects.
Okay.
They've had one meeting with the Veterans Memorial Committee so far. So there's more of a fact-finding. Where does the committee want to go? What elements are you really sure about? What things still need to be decided? There's a long way to go before design will come to you. In fact, that was something I was going to ask the park board next month to consider. What would you think of having a park board liaison serve on the committee?
I think it would be a good idea.
I had not given the opportunity. I didn't discuss this with my chairman. He's out of town now. I wanted to give him the courtesy of a phone call first. But I thought it could be something you could at least think about. We can discuss it at the next meeting, and whether that position should have a vote or not is something we ought to consider.
Okay, why don't we think about that, and then
put that on the agenda.
Yeah, and then how about somebody mentioned something about minutes of those meetings, if we were going to see minutes.
They're all in front of you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And they'll also be placed online.
Okay. Okay, so then we'll just wait to see over the next month, talk to that chair, and then people have a chance to maybe weigh in between this meeting and next meeting if somebody might be interested in being a part of that committee, if that's what we choose to do. And then I think it makes sense to have an open house to show off designs with the public at the same time. Does anybody have any?
John, are they meeting monthly now, or what's sort of the schedule that they're on?
The main committee meets monthly. It's been typically the second Friday of each month, third Friday of each month, 7:30 in the morning. The chairman sent me an email recently asking if this would be an appropriate time to step up the number of meetings in the short term. And it occurs to me, it seems like there's enough subcommittees that ought to be doing a lot of the work outside the main body that we'll stay on a 1-month schedule, and the architect also seemed to feel that that was appropriate.
Thanks, John.
Right. The under item 3C2 was the discussion of the facility user fee per participant. We seem to talk about that a little bit, and is there not going to be a study taken to determine activity by activity what the cost is for, say, soccer versus softball versus hockey.
I'm trying to recall if that was a request of the council to get into that level of detail. It's not going to be an exact science if that's the mission we're sent off to do. We can certainly take a shot at that. I think if you want to make this a priority item, we certainly can't have all four on the same agenda. We as staff aren't going to have time to get all the information in front of you, which is part of this discussion. But as the participant fee, it's going to come down to philosophically, do you feel should it be covering the expense, or the majority of it, for that particular venue, that sport? That's question one. Or should it all be the same, like it is now? And then the other question is, yes, it probably should go up. And the next question is how much? And I think some more background information for you to make an informed decision, and also to inform our athletic groups that this is under consideration, what it would generate, what the effects of their programs would be. That's part of the debate that you can have.
If I can comment, John, I didn't take away from it that the goal was necessarily to up the fees or fix it. I think what would be more as helpful initially is let's understand where our costs are, and let's get a handle on how the expenses sort of roll out. And I think once we have that information, then we can start thinking about, okay, what are really our objectives long term? And we realize we're in some places subsidizing programs, which may be just fine, but let's make that a choice versus just sort of a random act, and sort of understand that. So I think the most helpful thing from my perspective as a park board member would be, let's just sort of understand the overall dynamics of how it's currently structured. Yeah, we may want to understand what some of these costs are. And again, I'm not worried about getting down to the last nickel. It's more conceptually, how are these costs rolling out, and then the follow-on is let's have some discussion around that. Okay. From my perspective, I don't think we want to surprise these groups or turn around tomorrow and up all their fees, but more importantly, let's at least understand, does it make sense when you look at it? And I think what's happened is we have technology now and information now that 10 years ago we didn't have access to the level we do now. So let's use that data to sort of gather up and understand, where are we at, and where do we go from here?
We can certainly take a shot at that if the desire is to try to break it down sport by sport. We can do our best at that. We're not budgeted that way. We would have to take our best estimate because we have a field budget and we have an outdoor rink budget. How much of that is specifically expense just for hockey rink? That's something we can take a shot at and give you the raw data as best we can and go from there.
And maybe the first step is, before you go through a ton of work, is let's sit down and sort of talk that process through. So you're clear, we're giving direction or asking questions that make sense, not that you're putting in a ton of time and you come back and say, well, that isn't really what we wanted. Let's be clear on what we're asking for, so we aren't giving you a ton of direction and putting in a ton of work without really being sure what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, maybe it would help to have, for you just to say, well, look, here's how our budget breaks out, this is what we spend on fields, and yeah, then maybe we can try to formulate, okay, here's how many kids are in field sports, and, this is maybe a rough estimate where we're subsidizing or what have you, but having, I think to Randy's point, having a little bit more information, a little bit more tangible idea of where all these expenses are, we can then begin to drill down, and so not a whole ton of burden is placed on you.
We'd be happy to start with that. We can show you the budget, the field, and on the big picture of what we have, that's clear data. To then break it down per sport, you can discuss that then. Okay.
And I think part of the thought was not to throw 8 things at you here at once that you have to work on.
No, that's why we want to prioritize.
Yeah, but to me, maybe like this would be something, if we go back to item 3B and you talk about a work session, this would be, I think, something that would be really nice to work, around a table with and just talk about some data. We're not taking any action, but just try to work through the topic and then maybe bring it on to the park board later in the year potentially.
And I think that's an opportunity too to discuss philosophy. To Bill's point, express opinions. Maybe someone thinks everything should be subsidized, or maybe someone thinks everything should be total user fees. But we can start to back up the process, because I think from what I remember is it just kind of started as a good idea to start charging these people a dollar amount, and then it's increased incrementally, but that philosophical viewpoint hasn't been reevaluated, so maybe it's a good time to look at that.
Understood. Okay, I think I got clear enough direction on that one.
And anybody can help me out here, but the third one, it was the future of Edinburgh Park and Centennial Lakes, and that seemed like a pretty big, yeah, we could call it that. So there were some ideas that I think were bandied about, and I don't even know where to begin, but is that something that we should be considering or not? I mean, is that something that they're looking for some assistance with, or?
The reason why this is an issue that was requested by staff to put on the joint work session is, as I mentioned there is a trust fund that started at about $9 million. And in less than 5 years, that trust fund will now be whittled down to zero. We'll be out of money because there is a subsidy every year that to cover the subsidy, it comes out of the trust fund. So as I refer to it, it's the train that's running out of track, and we need to find either a way to bring in more revenue or cut expenses or find another source of subsidized funding of some sort, whether it be a franchise fee or the last thing we want to see happen, at least in staff's view, is to have it become another town square park like St. Paul, and it becomes private property. They sell it. Would hate to see us go down that road. No, maybe there's a lot of other ideas of what Edinburgh could be, or maybe should be, or has to be, or that's some of the discussion. I think one of the things I heard is this might be another excellent opportunity to get some professional consulting help. I think some ideas can be kicked around in a work session with the park board. I'm hearing input from a lot of folks already, both on the council level and from residents and staff. Would like to hear more of your input and the value of Edinburgh. We can show you all the data on what we have for visitation and where those people come from, how many are residents, and so on and so forth. We're trying to do a little better job of breaking out where are the maintenance and operating expenses within the park itself, what are the options, how does it affect the current contracts and agreements that are in place with those that own property around, those types of things. So it's a very large issue that's going to need attention soon, and that's something that's on our radar screen and a high priority. So it's something as we work toward, would like very much the park board's input into that process.
So, but these are separate issues. Sorry. But these are separate issues in the sense that Edinburgh is a separate entity from Centennial Lakes, correct?
They are of the same trust fund.
Okay.
So they are one and the same. They're considered Edinburgh/Centennial Lakes Park. So one goes with the other. But it seems clearly after we show you the numbers of what it costs to maintain things, we're going to have to look at some cuts or find another source of revenue.
So would it be safe to assume then that this is going to be an item that will probably, at some point, if we're running out of track here, is going to be coming towards us anyhow?
Yes.
Okay.
I would see this as, not getting ahead of ourselves here, but it's probably our highest priority as far as understanding. And I would see this as a workshop item to sit down and say, okay, here's the history, here's where we're at, and here's our current timeline or decision process in that timeline as a way of framing it initially, and then we can sort of go from there. So I don't have the history myself to understand, what possible solutions or the perspective on it. I think that's the first step here.
One of the interesting things I've seen that's been happening in municipalities is collecting the email addresses of citizens. And I think if we would start to do that in Edina, or if the park system would do it, I think there's a lot of ways to put a coupon on an email, and one grandchild or one child dips in for half price, and the other kid pays full price to use Edinburgh. I question how many people know about that facility, which we take our grandkids to, and they absolutely love it when they visit. And one of the things that I thought about is maybe the City of Edina or the City of Edina Park System should have a table at our farmers market in the center at Centennial, and feature what's available, how to use it. Members of the park board could volunteer to be there for a couple hours. I just question whether our citizens know all the incredible facilities that the park system has to offer.
If there are no comments beyond that, I would just move on to the last item. Was something that we touched on back in July, which was a little bit about the naming of parks and donations. And when looking at this, I'm just throwing out an idea here, if we had to prioritize things, if Edinburgh and Centennial Lakes is the most important item here, but it's also something that I think maybe we would benefit with a work session with City Council potentially, because this is something that I think they're going to have to weigh in on as well. Maybe doing something with them, and then having maybe a couple subgroups with interested park board members to discuss facility user fees, and then having another one to maybe try to pick up from where we were back in July with naming and facilities and donations policies. How do people feel about that?
I didn't understand the question. Could you?
What
are you asking us our opinion about?
I was just saying, if we were to tackle some of the items that we discussed, is maybe trying to schedule a joint work session with City Council on Edinburgh Park and Centennial Lakes, and then ourselves working on facility user fees to discuss that, and the pickup on where we left off back in July on naming policy and donations in smaller, maybe just work groups.
I like the idea of dividing it up, and I understand the urgency to some of it, but we have to be sensitive to staff time, of course. So what do you think of that, John, and how can it best be managed, do you think?
Well, thank you for that comment. Yeah, I think to do the Edinburgh Park, Centennial Lakes Park is going to require staff to do quite a bit of research, which we're currently working on. I think it's premature for me to make promises of my staff without asking them just how long it's going to take them before we're prepared to give you the information we feel you need to have an intelligent discussion of the facts and come up with a plan. I'd like to think a couple months ought to do it. We certainly can't have pile up on one work session and cover all these things. That doesn't work. Just one clarification: the donations policy and the naming policy are totally separate, but certainly good topics. And I would like the opportunity to do a little more research on those. That won't take as long as it will for Edinburgh and Centennial. And I think a 2-month period for the participant fee for us to pull together the data on that, I think is plenty of time. I'm not even sure I answered your question.
Well, from what I hear you say, I think it probably makes sense to have at least an Edinburgh and Centennial Lakes work session first, and then decide what we want to do in terms of any sort of subcommittee or group that's going to be formed. And you know, I think that should be the top priority. The rest of them seem less of a priority. And once we figure that out, we can move forward.
If I could ask the question about the facility user fee, can background materials on that be prepared much more quickly than the Edinburgh Park? And if it's already close to being prepared, I think that's also a high priority. So what we might, I think, properly say that Edinburgh Park and Centennial Lakes would be the #1 priority. But since it's going to take a while to pull the information together, is it possible for the park board to get started on user fees? Which I would classify as the second highest priority.
If that's the agreement of the park board, we'll do our very best to have it in front of you within 2 months.
Again, John, let me throw this out there. So we're feeling like 60 days is our timeline. I'd like to suggest a May workshop, and we spend the majority of the time on the Edinburgh Centennial Lakes Park, if that timeline works. And then we spend 30 minutes sort of looking at the facility user fee in the big framework. We're not looking for the detail. We're looking at, okay, let's understand how the budget flows, and then so that we have the information we need to say, okay, we're looking for this specifically. So you aren't trying to drill down more or spend a lot more time than is required up front. So is that a reasonable timeline and request? And you can answer, I guess, next month at the meeting if you need to spend some time, take some time to evaluate that as well.
Yeah, the facility user fee on that one, I think next month we could pull that one off if it need be.
Oh, even sooner, okay.
Yeah.
I think the idea is just to get some background to even develop our questions and decide what are our priority questions for you to. I do have a question though. When is and I can't remember, when do we approve changes to user fees? Is there a specific month?
And Ed and Janet helped me with this one. I think we do fees and charges in November.
I think it's much earlier. I was going to say, September. I want to say this last year they moved it earlier. It's typically in August that I'm getting questions from the finance department to pull together budget, and it's September, October when we're approving it, and it's probably November at the council level for fees and charges.
Oh, that's, yeah, they did move that. They did move that part of the budget process up for the first time. So that is a September park board item.
The other thing that I might throw out there is in terms of Edinburgh and Centennial Lakes. Right now, we're in the final stages of pulling together our business plans for all revenue facilities. Next Monday and Wednesday, we will be doing peer review, where we're going to have all the facility managers there kind of throw questions at each other and pick apart the different revenue facilities. Trying to better prepare ourselves and have a better end product. April 5th, I believe, is a work session with the council, and the business plans will be presented to the council on April 5th. So Doesn't mean we're going to have an answer on where Edinburgh needs to go, where Centennial needs to go, the Edina Aquatic Center, golf course, whatever. But it does mean we're going to have more information. We will have completed business plans, and we will have had dialogue internally and with the council.
Thank you for that reminder, Ed. And what the business plan still won't provide us, and something we're working on internally, is really trying to hammer out where the expenses are, to define what is it cost to provide the pool, what does it cost to provide, the adventure playground, the adventure peak, what does it cost to have the grotto and the amphitheater, and have those broken out so we can make informed decisions. What if we didn't have a pool and use it for another purpose? What if there was a different way to operate Edinburgh, whatever. So that's going to take a little more time than just a business plan, but you're right. We'll at least have a short-term vision of how we're going to operate down there, but within 5 or 6 years, we're going to have something else in place.
So then it might be possible to have a May-ish work session just to kind of do a brief educational overview on user fees in Edinburgh Park. And I just like to throw out the discussion at some point in the upcoming year to pick up from where we left off last July. I want to be aware that we don't want to try to throw too much on the table here at the same time, but I thought that was a good discussion that we should pick up again. And we did get information from Mr. Persha, who I see out in the audience. I know that this is important to him as well, too. So that would be something that I would like to see on the summer agenda as well.
Okay.
So it brings us to item 4, old business, the RFP for the Braemar Clubhouse consultant. And
the direction from the council at the joint work session was they liked your idea of going forward with a consultant, but they requested that staff start over again with a little more formal request for proposal process approach to hiring a consultant, and submit it to everyone that has an interest in it, that has expressed an interest to date, and to further analyze, are there any other consultants out there that we ought to consider. I threw together a rough draft of a request for proposal, which gives potential consultants about a 3-week window to respond to it. As you notice in the RFP, it states that you reserve the right to choose whatever consultant you feel has the best value to the community, and not necessarily who's the lowest bid. And as I also stated, anyone that has expressed an interest that wants to submit a proposal is by law legally rightful to do so. And I think the Park Board would reserve the right to pick whatever is the best value, and whether or not you wish to interview either one or more. That's another option. And the other thing I threw on here for your consideration, would you want to have a couple Park Board members assigned or volunteer to work with staff once the proposals are submitted to go over them, so you don't have just staff making a recommendation on who are the best 1, 2, or 3 top candidates, but you'd have a couple Park Board members weigh in on it. So with that, we stand to answer any questions and see where it goes.
I think it would be a good idea to have several Park Board members to help staff wade through the proposals.
I agree, and I'd be happy to serve in that capacity.
could that potentially be something that we did after a work session? And if when would you, expect to have, you said within 30 days, we'll have proposals back from them?
Well, the proposal deadline would be
March 31st?
the 29th.
29th.
And I would call a meeting of, what I'd like to do is distribute all of them to those, whoever the volunteers are, Todd, and whoever else, and then meet as soon as you feel you're ready to meet. And so we have a recommendation for your next park board meeting.
I'd like to do that with Todd, too.
Great. It doesn't have to be just two. If there'd like to be more, that's fine, too.
I'd like to participate also.
Okay, sounds like we got three.
I'm not volunteering to participate, but could you still distribute all the RFPs so that the rest of us could read them?
Oh, absolutely. That was
Thank
the
you.
plan.
So if there's no changes to the R,
I have a couple comments about this. Can I ask some questions about the? Sure. One, I think it's pretty good, but I was wondering if I could add a couple questions. Because I want to be really clear as to what we're trying to answer. So one of the questions that I'd like to add two questions. One would be, how do we change the Edina Golf enterprise from a money-losing enterprise to one that makes enough money to reinvest in its own facilities? If this is possible, how long will it take? What do we need to do to make it happen? If it is not possible, what are our options? For example, ongoing taxpayer subsidy, privatization, partial sale of property, or whatever. The next major question would be, the long-range vision for the Edina Golf enterprise is to make it one of the best, if not the best, public courses in the market. Is this possible given the objectives stated above? What are some long-range plan options to make this happen? And those are broad questions, but those are the ones that instead of getting to kind of details, I want to make sure that those are the questions that are addressed. In the scope of the study, I'd also like to add staffing compensation as a separate line item. I would like to ask them the question, are the right people in the right positions for success? That's not a question that is currently in that proposal. So those are some of the things that I'd like to add to that. And the other thing I'd like to add in one of the other sections on the back is I'd like to have some kind of full disclosure. We talked a lot as a park board about the need to make sure that we are aware if there's any relationships with the city, and we've not asked them to fully disclose their relationships with the city. So I'd like to include that as a statement that says, you know, the city of Edina is interested in hiring a consultant who's independent, unbiased, and without a conflict of interest. Please explain any relationships that the owners or principals or team members may have with the Edina Golf Enterprise or the city of Edina. Some kind of words like that should be added so that we're told up front. Those are my ideas. I don't know if you guys can discuss them.
One question of clarification. The statement you made, are the right people in the right positions? What is it you're asking of the consultant to do there?
I want them to use their best judgment to evaluate whether or not we have the right people in the right positions. My guess is that they are working with many different kinds of golf enterprises, and they'll know whether or not we have the right management team, whether we have the right people with experience in the pro shop, with accounting principles, and we need to know if we have the capability of making this a successful enterprise. And that's what I'm asking. I mean, it's a tough question, but I'd like an unbiased person to come in and take a look at it and tell us. And I mean that not, I don't want anyone to take, we're looking at the whole enterprise, and I think we need to look at that as well.
I guess of all the things, I guess I would take issue with the question for a document that comes published that says so-and-so is not qualified to be in the position that they're currently working. I think I have issue with that. I think that's more of a management issue, not a consultant to address. That's my own view. I think you're getting into some personnel areas that the consultant doesn't belong. That's my own bias. We deal with those things at a management level and not in the eyes of the public. That's
okay.
The other piece is I get a little concerned even with my own proposal that we may be asking for more than we're going to be able to afford. That's the only other thing. I think your questions are good, with the exception of that one that I have issue with, but and would like to have a written copy.
Yeah, I can get you one.
Okay.
We're going to be asking the consultant to look at all the staffing, and so I'm just wondering. I can appreciate sensitivity, and I'm just saying that as I look at the big picture, that this is why I'm asking that. But I would like to hear from the rest of the board what your opinion is. I'm okay going either way, but I kind of wanted to make that as a, do we feel as if this is a question that is on the table for a consultant to give us their opinion on?
No, I totally agree. I think, and that's one of the things they would likely study anyway, is do we have the right number of staff, the right number of positions for the certain tasks that need to be done, but to get into, do they have the qualifications, are they the right personality for the job or whatever? That's not something we ought to be asking a consultant to do.
Could the other members of the Park Board also have a copy of this material distributed by email, perhaps? Mm-hmm. It sounds very interesting, and I would invite all of us to get back to John with comments about what's been written, because it articulates what we're trying to do, or what the city is trying to do with regard to. Now, maybe it's not appropriate that the consultant, upon further reflection, comment upon all of this, but I think it has to be taken under advisement. So I would like a copy by email, and then it allows me to get back with comments by email to John and to staff. Thank
you. And I think if the Park Board feels strongly about do we have the right people in the right positions with the right skills, we may be able to filter that in a way that it goes to the HR here or it goes to John, or it goes to John and Scott, so that if we're paying for that information, or if that information is being gathered, it'd be a mistake for the consultant to not have a way of sharing it with us. And I agree, it shouldn't be a public document, it shouldn't be a disclosed item, but if that information is gathered, we're making a mistake if we're not sharing that with the administration of the city. So I don't need to know it, and I don't think anybody in the Park Board needs to know it, but I think if that information is being gathered and collected and discovered, it should be shared. So that's just my personal feelings.
Any gathered information is public information. It would become, if we were asking for it, it would become public. I guess where I'm coming from is to be sure we don't mix personnel issues versus filling positions. Do we have the right number of positions for the tasks at hand, and not get into personality and qualifications and that type of thing.
I think they're tough questions, but I think they're good questions, and I think they're not necessarily totally unfair questions for taxpayers in Edina who the course belongs to them, and maybe they would want to know some of those answers. I don't know. I'm just curious to know how people on the board think about Ellen's questions, because we're being asked to approve an RFP based on this criteria or not. Do we want to do that tonight? Do we want to deliberate it for a month and think about it?
That's really your call, and I'm happy to do with whatever you'd like. If you want to chew on this for a month, that's fine. If you want to empower staff to just move forward with it based on some input after 2 weeks, or this can certainly wait another month.
I think I would like another month to look at what Ellen put together and think about it, because I think it really focuses the RFP, and by the nature of its focus, I think we're feeling some discomfort, and so I think it warrants another month of thinking about it.
Yeah, I guess from my point of view, I defer a little bit more to staff's judgment here, and come with the understanding that the park board, the city council, whoever is an advisory role, and we have to empower staff to allow them to operate facilities, whether that be snow plowing or the golf course or what have you. And I think right now we're at the point where, okay, well, the golf course isn't making money, and not that that's the sole objective, but I think that's what Ellen's first question was very eloquently put, is does this make money, or can this make money, and are the right structures in place for this to make money? And when you start to drill down to material that, well, does this have the qualifications or personality, and I don't know that necessarily Ellen's questions get to that point, but I guess I'm uncomfortable being an appointed person diving into employment decisions with regards to one of our enterprise facilities, if that makes sense. So those are my thoughts.
There's another, maybe this is another good reason to wait for a month. I think those are excellent questions. I think those are the questions we want to get to, the answers we want to get. That instead of detailing what is in the scope of study, maybe you determine what answers and questions that you have, and then have the consultants tell you, well, yeah, I can do that, but here are the things that I think that would need to be studied to get you your answers, rather than us to assume that these are all the things that need to be studied. So that's another approach to it. And I think that's maybe worthy of giving it another 30 days. Just a thought.
Will you then take a crack at rewording, revamping the RFP to take into account some of the questions that Ellen has asked?
Yeah, absolutely. I would do that, and I would encourage the park board members, after you've viewed the questions in writing, if it sparks other questions that you have, that's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I think the real problem is. Maybe there's other questions that you hadn't thought of tonight. And then I'll come back at you with the next meeting with a rewritten RFP for your consideration.
Thank you.
That sounds like a plan. Any other comments?
Somewhere in the audience that may want to speak to this.
I'll be very brief. Number one, my name is Ray O'Connell, 4612 Bellevue Road, Edina, Minnesota. I'm a former park board member, and I want to congratulate you at the sanguinity that you showed this evening, and in your deliberations, I think are admirable. But besides that, I've come to request it, and I talked to John earlier about just quickly. And the only reason I'm asking this question, I've waited this long to be here, so we've got 2 osprey boxes up. One has been in use since 2009. It's had two fledglings so far, 2009 and 2010. And if you're really interested, be out around the 169 out there, the one that's south of the big tower, about April the 10th. That's when they'll come back, depending on the weather, but they will come back because it's just, when you get these things up and you see the results, it's just wonderful. And the osprey is a big bird. But the reason I came to the microphone is that we have a pole that is on Park Board property, west of the ice sheets, inside the fence on the lower lot. And it's a good pole. It's 45 feet long. And the golf course, Todd Anderson and John Valerie before him, and Tom Swenson would like to get that up. We got a spot. It's practically in the middle of the course, but it's in where there's heritage grass. That's native grasses that can't be disturbed, and the signage is there not to be disturbed. But frost is still in the ground, and the snow is going to go in a couple of weeks, hopefully. And I would like to get that pole transported, and we can all do it in-house with a front-end loader and put it in place. And I don't want to go over Vince's head, but I just wanted to make you know of it because I want to talk to Vince first because he's the superintendent of the grounds. And I want him, and he knows already that he's been requested, but I haven't talked to him personally, so I want to talk to him about getting it. But I just want you to know because that's going to go out right off by the 5th tee and above the 14th green in this heritage grass. And the design for all these ospreys boxes is to bring more notoriety to the parks. And it's working. And people like to watch them. And then, just as an aside, when you talked earlier about having transparency and so forth, you're watched. Not just by me, but people are going to the edina.org site, and you'll be surprised how many people tune that in on Tuesdays and Saturdays. And you aren't getting comments back, but just one other little thing. We're going to $5 gas. And you were talking earlier about costs and so forth and so on. People are really starting to watch their pennies because all your commodities are going up, and I grew up in the Depression, and I know what Depression is like. But the one wonderful thing about the Depression I went through, it made us all be can-do people. And that's one of the blessings that came out of it. It was tough getting to be can-do. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray. Agenda item 6, seeing nobody else in the public. John, you have any updates?
You know, the only update I have is I was out of commission for about 3 weeks and have been slowly working back to a full-time day due to illness. But it reminds me that, and I probably should mention the park board, I will not be here for the July meeting. I'm having a knee replaced, and I'm going to be out of commission for that month of July. That might be we should probably try to schedule our calendar. Maybe that might be an excellent opportunity to do a workshop, work session, whatever you want to call it, and have Ed there. I would be laid up. So I'm having it scheduled so it's after the June park board meeting, so I'll be here from now to June. Otherwise, I don't really have much for updates. I've been out of commission for a few weeks, but still trying to get back on my feet. So good. Thanks.
Agenda item 7 is election of officers.
I'll run this part of the meeting. As I stated in the staff report, this is the month we elect both our chair and vice chair, and everyone here has the opportunity to serve as chair, including the current, because you've been the chair only for a year. And the way this works is I will accept nominations, and you can nominate yourself if you wish. So with that, we'll start with Do I hear any nominations for chair?
I'd like to nominate Joseph Hobart to serve as chairman for another term.
Are there any other nominations?
Move to close nominations.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? I assume you accept the challenge?
Yeah, I'll do for another year.
I don't think you need to take any more votes. Congratulations. Thank you for serving. I'll now open the floor for election of vice chair.
I'd like to nominate Gia Steele.
Any other nominations? I hear a motion to close nominations.
So move.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I assume you're willing to accept that responsibility. Thank you for serving. I appreciate that very much.
Any park board comments? I guess I'd like to say one thing. I think Janet Canton does an incredible job with her minutes. It's almost as though you write down what I say better than how I actually speak it, so you do a wonderful job. Thank you. No other comments? Meeting's adjourned. I think I got the whole stack of Veterans Memorial minutes right here.